it was like, okay, one more, and then I quit. I kept trying to start Killer in the Family with the first scene where Ali meets his prospective in-laws and has an arranged marriage, but there just wasn't enough there to keep the story going. Fail early and often, right? Like just like forget it. Like don't try and get it right. Like if you're writing a computer program and you're designing something, like prototype, prototype, prototype. Don't confuse your finding the story with what is the finished product.
Hello, and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelly Vick, I'm the host of the program, and that was Amin Ahmad. Amin was raised in India, and he came to the United States at the age of 17, where he worked as an architect for many years before turning to writing. He published 2 thrillers as A.X. Ahmad and won the 2020 G.S. Chandra Prize for his book of short stories before taking a years-long break to find his true subject matter. Now he's back with his debut book club thriller, A Killer in the Family. Amin now teaches creative writing at Duke University, and on today's episode, we're talking about the huge family secret that inspired his latest novel, why it's important to fail at writing, why you might want to start hanging around with screenwriters, even if you write literary fiction, and so much more. So let's get started. Amin Ahmad, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your captivating new novel, A Killer in the Family. In a starred review, Kirkus says, full of big ideas and twists and turns, Ahmad's excellent novel ratchets up the allure and danger of power. Author Angie Kim says, A Killer in the Family is a gripping, propulsive thriller that weaves a cutthroat family battle over a business empire with a heart-pounding hunt for a notorious serial killer. A thought-provoking interrogation of the dark side of power, ambition, and the American dream. Author Sujata Massey says, A Killer in the Family is rich in twists and turns and unrelenting suspense. The novel is also a deeply moving interpretation of the complicated dynamics of ambition, love, and family history. And author Alka Joshi says, racing through A Killer in the Family is the most fun I've had in years. Skillful, atmospheric writing, unreliable narrators, and a nuanced contrast between old South Asian culture and the new generation. Not until I turned the last page did I fully grasp what had been right in front of my eyes the entire time. What a ride. So with that, what can you tell us about A Killer in the Family? How do you describe this one?
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's the elevator pitch, of course. It takes a slightly long elevator ride, like maybe 5 or 6 stories. Um, but let me see. So the novel is about a young man from Mumbai, India. He's kind of a slacker, kind of a party boy who has an arranged marriage with the daughter of an ultra wealthy New York family who have this huge real estate empire. And the young man's not really excited about his prospective bride. In fact, he thinks her sister is a little cuter. But he goes with it anyway and gets married because it's a shortcut to a glamorous life. Shows up in New York, enjoys the family wealth, the Upper West Side apartment, the family estate out on Long Island, the helicopter rides. But then he begins to realize something is very wrong with this family. There's a dark side to them, and maybe they're linked to a notorious serial killer that was active in New York like 10 years ago. So that's my pitch.
And this story was in part inspired by a secret within your own family. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's right. There's several aspects of this book that I'm kind of drawing on my own personal history. My mom comes from a big international sort of business family. The Kojas, they're from the west of India, and they source their brides and grooms for their children internationally, like because the that community is also in East Africa, they're in India, they're in the Middle East, they're in Portugal, they're in Washington, D.C. So when the time comes for an arranged marriage, you kind of start exchanging resumes all over the globe. So that was one part of it. The second part of it is that I grew up, my mom's family is a big business family, and I grew up as a kid being around a table with 30 people, big mahogany table, everybody's eating. And the patriarch of the family business was my mom's great uncle, who was a very handsome, charismatic, somewhat violent man. At least he felt that way to me. There was a kind of a sort of a seething undertone to him. And when he died, two young men showed up at his funeral who looked exactly like him. And it turned out that he had a entire second family that he would go to visit on the weekends. And apparently this was an open secret. And like I didn't know about it. I only found out about it like probably in my 30s or my 40s. And I was like, what? So this idea of having this secret that really resonated through the family, but was never talked about is something I kind of put in my own book, the idea of these family secrets that sit there and are toxic in some way, but can never be talked about or touched.
There's also some Great Gatsby influence happening there.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I love Gatsby. And I've just read it and reread it for years. And I never really realized why I liked it so much. And then I realized, oh yeah, Gatsby is kind of an immigrant. He comes from a different world. He's trying to reinvent himself. He's trying to impress the East Coast elite. And I always wanted to write an immigrant version of Gatsby, but I just didn't know how exactly to do it. And so on the heels of a failed novel, I'd been working on something for 6 years that didn't fly.
Wow.
Got an agent for it, started revising, created a huge Frankenstein mess. And I was driving down the Jersey Turnpike, kind of by the New York exits, and saw this big black limo with a guy sitting in the back, tinted windows in the back, but a chauffeur up front, and the license plate said "Sing is King," and that's an Indian name. And I began to view this guy through a Gatsby-esque lens. And I started thinking, oh, this is kind of a badass businessman who's made his money and is proclaiming it to the world. And so that became the germ of Killer in the Family was kind of this sighting of it. Yeah.
This is your first novel as Amin Ahmad.
Yeah.
You published two thrillers previously
Yeah.
as AX Ahmad.
Yeah. Like nobody would guess that I'm the same person.
You've had a prize-winning story collection
Yeah.
under your name, but you have said
Yeah.
that until A Killer in the Family, you feel like you were still finding your subject matter. And I
Yeah.
wonder if you could talk about that. You just talked a little bit, mentioned the 6 years on the other novel. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, the journey, I mean, I sort of started writing in my 40s. I had a long career as an architect and went into it because I thought it would be creative, and then found myself in a suit and tie negotiating construction contracts with a bunch of lawyers, and then started taking writing classes. Um, but um, the to cut a long story short, when I started writing, Jhumpa Lahiri was big. And she was a Boston writer. I lived in Boston. She was writing about my neighborhood. She was writing about the Indian store that I went to. And there were all these immigrant stories that were coming out at the same time. And I felt like the immigrant story of coming to America, of cultural misunderstanding, of marrying a white American, and what happens when your mother comes from India and cooks smelly food, like all that stuff had been done. So what am I going to write, you know?
Hmm.
And I was the guy in my writing class who wrote beautiful novels about nostalgic stuff about India, and nothing ever happened. So I happened to be in New York City, started taking suspense classes actually, and thought, okay, so genre is a great way for me to start writing. And I wrote two crime novels that got somehow, by the will of God, got published. I didn't quite know what I was doing. I wasn't really in control of the writing process. But I think that those novels were a bit early, and they were not that interested in kind of the immigrant figure, and publishers not knowing how to market it. Like, ooh, what is this? So how do you put out a thriller mystery in a very kind of mainstream space? And it was supposed to be a trilogy, so I wrote two novels for that. And then my editor left the press, and my agent left her agency, and I was orphaned for And I'd written the third part of the trilogy. This crime trilogy was sitting on my hard drive, and my editor before leaving said, "Oh, this is your best one yet," but nobody wants it. So then I spent 10 years kind of writing novels and putting them out there and not really getting bites or interest. Wrote about three or four novels. And then for the fourth one, got an agent, worked on it for 6 years. It was very much in the crime novel space. And my agent was like, okay, can we revise it to make it more sort of in the more mainstream? And I did that. It didn't really work. So when I came to writing Killer in the Family, I was really I had it was like okay one more and then I quit and but I had written so much with such little expectation and I'd really learned my craft and at the same time I'd been teaching creative writing first at for adults and then at Northwestern University in Chicago and then at Duke here that I just really felt like I knew my craft and that I was getting deeper into my own personal stuff. I knew how to take it and transform it in within the genre within the realm of genre using genre elements, right? So that's my long and sad story.
With a happy ending.
Yeah, it is so funny that like retrospectively, like in the last month, because Killer and the Family is out there and is getting some attention, you can say, okay, this is a happy ending now. But when you're in it, you're not like, oh, I am so brave, I am persevering, I am so tough, I am building my craft. You're like, no, it's just a mess, and you're just bungling your way through every day and hoping for the best. And yeah, so now I can craft a narrative of resilience and some success, although for authors that's always shifting, right?
Yeah.
But a couple of like even a couple of years ago, I was just a guy with a bunch of novels on my hard drive. So
Well, you mentioned genre elements
yeah,
when we're talking about a killer, when talking about a
yeah,
killer in the family. I was interested in talking to you a little bit about genre
mm,
in this respect because
yeah,
we hear it being called a thriller. It
yeah,
feels very much like a thriller. It's very
yeah.
propulsive. Also, book club and literary is are also terms that are thrown in there.
Mhm.
So, how do you describe this one? How do you, as far as genre is concerned?
Yeah, I would describe it as sort of a literary thriller to some extent. I mean, I know we're all like Donna Tartt fans, and we'd love to occupy that kind of territory where you can write a nice, big, juicy book that's also a great mystery. Um, so I just write what I'm interested in writing, and then it's packaged and sold a certain way. And unfortunately, I have this mix of like reading very literary stuff and loving like writers like Donna Tartt and Lauren Groff and people like that. And at the same time, just loving at the end of a tough day, just being able to pick up a genre novel and say, okay, I know what this is, right? And then the distance between me and the novel collapses because it's like, okay, this is a murder mystery. This is going to work. I know how this is what's going to happen here. But still wanting surprises from it. So I think genre really collapses the distance between the writer and the reader. So using some of those, I like to use those elements, and I kind of came to this from crime fiction. So I'm still trying to find my way in terms of exactly what my books are. But I also just love families. And messed up families are just so great because they have all kinds of power dynamics and hidden secrets and triangulations between various people, and there's always like a black sheep, and so I think my kind of joke for this book was the alternate title was Bad Indians, just bad Indians. It's like no more doctors, lawyers, engineers, computer scientists, just bad Indians. And so I think I'm on a bad Indian kick, and my next book is also going to be about bad Indians.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that
Yeah.
family dynamic and how all families probably have this underlying operative emotions of anger and
Mm.
guilt. Maybe
Yeah.
not killers in the family, but this. And what do you think it is that really draws you to exploring that?
Just the way that I grew up, because when you're a kid, kids are not stupid.
Mm,
And they might not be told things, but they sense things are off in the family,
mm,
and they don't really accept, they kind of have to accept the explanations that are offered to them about why things are the way they are. Um, but I think that growing up in a family that had these kind of secrets and also went from being unbelievably wealthy with a big kind of mansion in Calcutta. They were tea and jute merchants, and then they lost all their money. And I had an uncle, a different uncle, who ended up occupying the family mansion. And I grew up in that mansion, and I would go back and visit there, and it was just crumbling around us, and eventually was demolished and, developed as a high-rise building.
mm,
So I'm really fascinated by kind of rags to riches and then riches to rags again, and just all those kind of dynamics that go on from childhood. I'm very nosy. I am always like poking my nose in stuff and just being, hey, what's the real story here? Like, people tell you things and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. So I think, and also just kind of being a bit of an outsider. So when I was 11, I was sent off to boarding school in the north of India, and it was a very posh boarding school populated by the sons of industrialists and Maharajas and politicians' kids. And the Prime Minister of India's grandson was there at the same time I was. And I was a kid who came from a pretty, my dad had a salary. That was the big difference.
mm,
He was on a salary, like everybody else was just rich. There was one guy who's had an entire town named after him. There were like Maharajas who would take time off from school to go grouse shooting in Scotland. And I just kind of grew up around those people. So, like, again, being exposed to that kind of insane amount of wealth as a child and not coming from that and then being trying to fit into that environment. I was fascinated by these kids who just didn't seem to study, didn't seem to be worried about it, right?
mm,
And I look at them now, and a lot of them have had to knuckle down and follow the family narrative, right? Which is like join the family firm and become the CEO, no matter what they wanted to do. And they've had people who have been chosen for them as brides, and they just I'm sure some of them, they don't know who they are really, because they don't know what they've done, what the money has done. It's Money is very confusing. So I think these are all things that are kind of I that have been kind of part of my DNA growing up this way. And I think as a writer, when you first start writing, you discard your own personal experience and you want to use more kind of tropey genre things
mm.
or things that are out there in the culture, things you've seen on TV. And it's taken a while for me to kind of figure out what my real obsessions are.
Well, speaking of following family narratives,
Yeah.
um, you've said that arranged marriages are kind of a trope of
Yeah.
fiction, but you wanted to take that trope and do something new and different with
Well,
it.
thank you for saying that. That's exactly it. I mean, I would just joke with my friends like, okay, so after being so much rejection and going through the publishing industry, which is largely white, right? You have to thread the eye of the needle. You have to go through as a POC author through this white industry where the agent's all white, the editor's all white, and then you reach your readers on the other end, and they will imagine what your readers are for you. Um, yeah, I just was joking with some friends and I said, why don't I just write a damn novel about an arranged marriage, then somebody will buy it. But then I began to think after joking about it, I thought, oh, that's a great trope for kind of suspense because you're marrying somebody and you really don't know who they are. You've seen the exterior, you've seen the facade, you've met somebody like even like 5 times or 10 times or whatever. You don't really know who they are. So I thought that would be a great idea about like marrying into a family and and just being dazzled by the glitz of it and then being in the belly of the beast and then kind of seeing what that's really like. Yeah.
The setting and
Hmm.
the settings are so rich. And you have said that your way into fiction is really
Hmm.
place.
Yeah.
Can you talk
Yeah.
about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, having grown up all over India and then living in the Middle East, in Dubai, in Singapore, in London, and then up and down the East Coast. Like I just lived my whole life in so many different places. Like I've lived in Chicago and New York, Washington, D.C., Boston. So it's just like I'm always been moving and you always come to a new place and you're like, oh, how does this work? Like what is going on here? What are the obsessions of this place? So that's kind of always been my way in. And then I think that interest in place encouraged me to become an architect, and I like building buildings, and so that's the way that I look at things. I mean, I can be in a foreign city and look at a Renzo piano museum and feel like I'm meeting an old friend. It's like, oh, okay, I can see the moves that he's making here, which he's done in different museums elsewhere. You can see the way architectural ideas travel. um, and then for me, New York is like a really special place because I went to a Vassar College up in Poughkeepsie, New York in the 80s, the mid 80s, dating myself, and would take the Metro North train down to New York, and it was just blew me away on every level. Filthy, graffitied, dangerous. And you go down to Washington Square Park and people are smoking weed and hooking up in the men's room and just like crazy music. And it was just like, wow, this is the city. There was so much going on here. And I would go down there. I would go to Curry in a Hurry down in Murray Hill and eat with the cab drivers. I would go to the Strand and buy books. So for me, New York is like the city for me where I feel at home. I go to India, I'm homesick for America. In America, I'm homesick for India. But when I'm in New York, I'm fine. I'm good. I got everything that I need. So for me, New York is really something that is sort of is my city. And then these kind of wealthy environments that I'm writing about, as an architect, you don't get paid much money, but you do develop very expensive tastes. So for a long time, I've been like living in like real dumps and then like reading these cool architecture magazines about like how, somebody's built like a really cool house in Montauk or like out on Long Island and like just looking at this stuff through the lens of an architect and then consuming all these environments. So it was fun in the book because I was just I could, if I wanted an environment, I just write about it, put it in there. Um, and the environments in the book are like either real or based on real places. So it was just really fun doing the research and going out there. Like the Khan's estate out on Long Island is based on, I think it's pronounced Ohika Castle, which was built by Robert Barron in the 20s and then went into decline, was ruined. And this guy bought it and restored it, and now it's a wedding venue. And it's just absolutely stunning, 1920s Gilded Age kind of opulence. And so it was really fun to take that and put into my book as Shere Khan House and look up real estate listings for the Apthorpe and look at apartments in there and live vicariously. And the funny part is that having written all this, I feel like I own it. Like I was doing a reading last week at the Strand on the Upper West Side, which is in the 80s, and Columbus. So I got there early and I was just walking around the neighborhood, which is all these big apartment buildings with a doorman, right? Like standing outside. I was like, oh, I own this. Like I wrote about this. This is mine, So yeah, so I just I love places and I love New York and I could set endless novels in New York because there's just so many contradictions and the wealth and the poverty and the different worlds that are there either colliding or just sitting next to each other is just fantastic.
From a craft standpoint,
Yeah.
you do such a wonderful job at really describing these places and really putting the reader in so immersively. But at the same time, it's so propulsive. You don't really spend like waste a lot. There's not like pages and pages and pages,
Mm.
where we're just really describing setting. And I'm wondering
Right.
how you do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think fiction is interesting because unlike movies, we're not confronted with a finished reality, right? On a movie, you might love it, you might, go back and watch it, might become your movie, but it's a finished thing. Whereas books are kind of grids or scaffoldings of description into which you feed your own experience. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think even though I describe Abbas Khan, the main character, or the Aptop apartment, if you ask 10 different people, they would have different pictures of it on their head. There would be some overlap. So
Mhm.
I think that with fiction, it's really finding the telling details that will evoke evoke the place. So it's like the iceberg principle. I'm sure other authors have talked about this, where there's 1/10 of the iceberg is above water, but you sense the 9/10 underneath. So it's really kind of finding that detail. And I was just thinking about this recently because I teach undergraduates, and one of my undergraduates some time ago was writing a story set in a morgue, and she got stuck with it.
Mm.
And so she went on and online and looked up there are these blogs by people who work in morgues. And one of the details she got was that they would shampoo the hair of the corpses with apple scented shampoo, so the whole place smelled of apple, like kind of artificial apple smell.
Mhm.
And once you put that into a story, it just suddenly the whole thing just came alive, right? Like it went beyond like some cliche you've seen on TV to something real. So I think it's really finding those telling details. And often what you're going to see on the page for me is like one or two paragraphs that survive from like, 3 pages of writing earlier. Because when you're writing it, the first draft, you don't know. You just pack in whatever it is. And then maybe you've overwritten or you've underwritten, and then you try and figure out what is it that makes this thing pop.
Well, and speaking of pace and what's making it pop, you also do a lot in this novel with compressing and moving time. We'll get little hints. There are all of these
Mm.
questions that are raised in the reader's mind, and then we kind of skip ahead, and then we go back, and it all feels quite seamless. Um, can you talk about that technique and how that's working for you and what your process is like as you're sort of mapping all of this out and thinking about how you're going to do it?
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that question. So having written up tons of novels and trying to do it by the seat of my pants, I've come up with kind of a hybrid process where I will allow myself to write for like 100, 150 pages, just write, and discover the story, try different voices, try different things, and just make a mess. And then once I've done that, I will try and rationalize that mess a little bit. And then I will outline the whole story on index cards all the way through. And initially, maybe I can only see 5 scenes or something. Oh, there's a wedding, somebody gets killed, there's a scene where these two people make up or whatever. And then I will go back and iterate on that and fill in gaps and change things and keep doing that. So I can work for 6 months and I'll just end up with a bunch of boxes of more and more index cards. Um, and then when I have a good scaffolding, I kind of sit down to write. So that's a way of I kind of write the book without having to write it, but just doing it. And an index card is very benign. It's small. It's friendly. It's like, oh, I can write on this. Even on bad days where I feel stuck, I could put down 2 sentences on an index card. This is my
Mhm.
friend, as opposed to a big blank page or an endless computer screen. So I can iterate quickly on that. And once I have that scaffolding, I sit down and write the book. So that gives it some cohesion. Um, but in terms of creating suspense in Killer and the Family, I think there's two techniques that I can point out for people who are writers and who are listening to this and who are interested. One, as you so cleverly pointed out, was time. So if your character is coming up on an event that the reader is anticipating, you can actually cut right before that event and then jump forward like a few days after the event. And the reader's like, wait, what happened at that launch? What exactly? I'm waiting to find out. So they're kind of charged up and they're waiting. And then you need to reveal it, like maybe in backstory, but in a way that the reader doesn't feel cheated, right? So that way you can quickly compress time. You can jump over things that are obvious. So that's some time management going on there. And then in terms of point of view, I sort of was telling it in a sort of Gatsby-esque Nick Carraway point of view, which is first person from the point of view of an observer who's outside this world. In this case, Ali, the new son-in-law, who enters the world of the cons. And as he finds out about the cons, we find out about it, we, the reader, at the same time as he does. So that was kind of a Nick Carraway point of view. And it's told retrospectively from about 3/4 of the way through the story, right? It starts with Ali at a certain point in his life, and he's like, "How the hell did I get here?" And then the book is a recounting of it. So because he's telling it retrospectively, he can say things like, "What I didn't know at this time was," or "I was so stupid to have done this," and that foreshadowing adds another layer of suspense. And then another layer of suspense comes from the two different points of view I'm using. I initially only had the new son-in-law's point of view as he's entering the family, but I felt like, oh, this is not enough. I need another point of view here. So I chose the oldest daughter of the Khan family, Farhan, who's kind of a mess, but is also kind of truthful and she knows the family secrets that Ali doesn't. So I have Ali's point of view mainly, and then I have some diary entries from Farhan's point of view. So Ali can go to a party at the family estate and be like, "Oh, they were lovely people. They were so nice to me." And then we flip to Farhan's point of view, and Farhan is recounting the same event from a whole different perspective. And then I think that makes for a much more active reading experience for the reader because they're trying to figure out what's the truth. This is Ali's point of view, this is Farhan's point of view, like what's really going on. So I think readers love it when they have to piece together a story. It's never give them five, give them like, 2 plus 2 plus 1 or 2 plus 3 and let them figure it out. There's much more pleasure there. So I think these different levels are things that I've kind of discovered in my writing process. And of course, other writers are doing them and doing them so much better than I am. So
I don't know that they're doing it better than you are. If they are doing it, you're doing it very, very well.
thank you. Thank you.
You have mentioned that you were an architect and
Yes.
then moved into writing. Did you always write on the side? What was that transition like from architecture into full-time writer?
Yeah, so I came to this country in 1985, uh, and then my wife will joke with me and ask me about pop culture, like in the 80s and 90s. And I don't know anything, and she says, "Well, what were you doing?" I said, "I was really busy being an immigrant." You know what I mean? Like just like trying to figure out my life and undergrad, and then job and grad school, and earning a living and surviving. And I grew up reading. I was a reader, deeply introverted, quite a strange child who checked out of reality and just was lived in books. I was always writing. I was the editor of my school newspaper. And it's funny, so some of my high school friends never seen me as an architect. So when they meet me and now as a writer, they're like, "Oh, of course it makes sense. Like you were always a writer, you know." But I didn't know any writers. I didn't know how a book was written. There was the distance between me and a book was so huge. And when I first came in '85, there were no Indian American authors. I remember the first book that came out by Bharati Mukherjee wrote a book of short stories set in New York. And I was like, oh my God, like this Indian American, the first Indian American writer, I think. Um, so I just went into architecture because I thought it was creative. And then woke up in my 40s, late 30s, and realized if not now, never, this is not going to happen. And I was lucky that Grub Street, which is a great writing center in Boston, they have terrific classes. They were just starting. And my teacher there, I took a class with a young person who just finished her MFA, Jenna Blum, who's also a novelist. In fact, we just had novels come out together. We just had a lovely conversation. Um, and she just started this master novel class, and you had to submit some pages to get in. And I got in, and I loved it so much. I just kept taking a class for like 3 or 4 years with the same bunch of people. Like people didn't leave, and that became kind of my MFA. And I would spend the weeks, with a young child, out on construction sites working, and I lived for that couple of hours a week in the evening where we could go and talk about writing and talk about craft. And so that became my entry point into writing. And those people that I was in that class with are some of them are still my friends. And along the way, I've taught writing, and my students have become best-selling authors. And that writing community has really kept me going. And when somebody goes through the door or gets an agent or gets published, and then you're going through the same process, it's so opaque. You can call them up and say, "Hey, what do I do about my cover? Like, how do I deal with this situation?" And then people will tell you. So I feel so grateful that I'm part of this community of lovely writers. Writers are strange people. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we're very weird to sit in rooms and write. But like, if you're in trouble with a point of view issue, like, who's going to help you? Like I can give it to my wife, who's super smart, but she's not a writer. She's just like, "Yeah, it's not working. Why is it not working?" I don't know. It doesn't feel right. You give it to another writer, they'll read it and they'll give you a good, honest take. Like, "Oh yeah, I think like third person would be better, or whatever." So really, it was just through classes and then teaching, creating writing communities in every city that I've been in, and then keeping those people along with me. And yeah, that's really my the way I've survived in the writing life.
How did you find your agent? Well, you said initially you had one agent and then you had to find another.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how did that come about?
Yeah, my first agent was my writing teacher's agent. Um, and my writing teacher very kindly recommended me to her agent, who got my first couple of books published. And then she ended up leaving her agency. Um, and then my second agent, I was in a writing group in Chicago. Yeah, we were just talking about how cold it is in Chicago. I had a writing group, and I would take the L down there in my huge parka and hang out. And I was in this writing group with two women who were my former students in an adult writing class.
Mm,
And after the class ended, I said, "You guys are just so great. Like, let's start a writing group." And we did that. And one of the people in my writing group, she had an agent in New York, and she introduced me to this agent, who's now currently my agent, Erin Harrison. Erin and I met for coffee, and for 2 or 3 years, he keeps saying to me, like, "Are you done yet? You got pages?" I say, "No, no, no, I don't have pages. I'm still working on it." And I think that's the opposite because people are so anxious to send agents a page. Just like, what's up with this guy? He's just not like refusing to send me stuff. So then I sent her the novel and we spent a couple of years working on it. It didn't really work. And then she said, "You got anything else?" And I said, "Yeah, I got this idea for Killer." And she's like, "Okay, that's really good. Write that." So that was then a year of like button chair, and then Aaron did a terrific job of getting it out there and on submission. So I feel like Aaron and I have been through a lot together, and it's like one of those things where, like, like any relationship, when things are going well, it's great. But when things are tough is when the relationship is really tested. And I feel like we've gone through so much stuff together. I really feel like this is my battle hardened, comrade.
Well, you have said, let's see, I was looking for where I've jotted it down. I'll
Yeah.
paraphrase. Basically, you've said that writing is about failure.
Yeah, that's really cheerful, isn't it? I'm a bit of a
To
depressive.
elaborate.
I'm a bit of a depressive. No, I mean, I really think when I go into my classes at Duke and I teach undergraduates here who are super smart and pre-professional and used to coming in and like figuring out how to get an A in the class and just killing it, right? And they'll come to my class and they're very upset because they just like, "I wrote this, it's terrible." I'm like, "Yes, well, welcome to the club." Like that's how you write something. What you've written is not a story. It's a draft. You can take another 4 drafts and it'll get better. But you gotta put something out there. When it's in your mind, it's golden. It's this perfect novel. The instant you start writing it, you ruin it in some way because it's never that good, right? So much of writing is just kind of writing things that are not very good and then having the courage and the skill to stick with it and to revise it and to be open to feedback, to get it to a place where it actually goes from something that's very tentative and unformed and something that feels inevitable and real, right? That's the whole part, that's the whole writing process. So yeah, it does involve failure. And at MIT, when I studied architecture, they would say fail early and often, right? Like, just like forget it. Like, don't try and get it right. Like, if you're writing a computer program and you're designing something, like prototype, 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 just like crank stuff out, see what works, and then go once you have a range of things and you're not trying to make it perfect, you're just looking for information because failure is information, right? So I actually have, we were talking earlier about my writing process. I actually have a part of my writing process that's built to tolerate failure, which is just like create a big mess, write 150 pages, try different things and just see what works. And it's okay to fail then. But I think people are really, really scared of failure, and it's a hard thing to imagine. So yeah, so my poor undergraduates, when I start my failure lecture, they're just looking at me like, "What's wrong with this guy? Just tell me, how do I write a really good story?" But I've seen 19, 20-year-olds, people in my class, maybe a little older, write amazing, amazing stuff. Really, really, really amazing, great stuff. because they also have the courage to just fail quickly, because they don't have anything invested in it. They're not novelists. They're not like, oh, I know, I'm so great. They're just like, it's a class. Let me see. It's like, so once they get the hang of it and they know they're not going to be penalized for failing, they just jump in and they create great stuff. I just finished teaching a novel writing class where people wrote an outline of their novels and the first 50 pages in a semester, which is kind of nuts given how much these other students are doing, and really, really good stuff. I'm just blown away. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go take your undergrad class. What do you know now that you wish you had known before publishing your first book?
Like in terms of writing or publishing or
Any of it, anything.
yeah, that's really the question, isn't it? What would I have known? If I'd known what I've known, I would just quit. But no, but really, like I think one of the things that I try to pass on to my students is that don't confuse your finding the story with what is the finished product, right? Because there's one either in an outline or in a draft where you're finding what the story is,
Mhm.
but that's not the finished product. That's just a discovery draft. And then you can slice and dice that story and tell it in different ways, right? Like you can write an entire novel and you find the entry point to the story. Like for me, I kept trying to start Killer in the Family with the first scene where Ali meets his prospective in-laws and has an arranged marriage, but there just wasn't enough there to keep the story going. So I actually found as I was developing the story that about three-quarters of the way through the novel, there's a scene where he's just wondering how the hell did I get here? So I wrote that scene and I moved it to the beginning of my novel, right?
Mhm.
But I could not have done that without finding the story. So don't confuse the this discovery draft with what is your final product. And I think yeah, and then just I would tell people like, don't give in to the myth that writing is suffering and isolation. Like have writer friends, have writers groups, get feedback. That will keep you going and learn the craft of it. It's a craft, right? It's like being a carpenter. You're going to make a lot of wobbly, not very good tables before you make a really good one. And it really is a craft. And I think we lose the fact that we're storytellers, right? You got to know how to tell stories. And novelists tend to be, oh, I'm so intuitive. I have to suffer. I have to go deep inside myself. But, the people who talk very honestly about the craft of storytelling are screenwriters. Like, go get some screenwriting books. They will tell you how to structure the first act, the second act, the third act, whether it's a five-act structure, an eight-act structure, what do you do in the middle, like all that kind of stuff. They're just blatant about it. And once you know that, you'll feel free to discard it, but at least you know how to tell stories. And you can't argue with these people because who are telling 7, 8 seasons of very sophisticated long form storytelling on streaming, right? Like,
Mhm.
so that's what your book is going to be competing against anyway. So might as well learn story structure from there. And then the last thing is really like publishing is very subjective, I've got so much rejection, and I have one editor who really believed in the book, acquired it, has supported it, has been an amazing yeah, has been amazing in supporting the book. Just I was trying to find the word for it. Like I was gonna say patron or something, but it's really she's really put resources behind the book. So then you just have to have a thick skin, and also I think publishing is big and nobody's going to care about your book as much as you do. So learn about the publishing process. Like people are so tired by the time they finish writing a book, and it's so hard that they just want to send it out there and get approval and have somebody publish the book and it become a bestseller. And sadly, that's not how it works. There's a whole publishing side to it. And there are books out there about the publishing industry. There's one on Princeton University Press that's an anthropologist looking at publishing.
Oh,
I'm forgetting
wow.
I think it's called Under the Covers. And it follows the whole process and makes very clear how an editorial meeting works when a junior editor is trying to pitch a book to acquire it in-house, how your sales force works, how marketing works, how things get sold to bookstores. So it's the whole process is so bewildering, but I think at some point you gotta figure that out. You just can't hope for the best, you know. Yeah.
This is all such great advice. I mean, thank you so much. We have a traditional last question
Okay.
on this podcast, and we were just talking about screenwriters.
Yeah.
So, when A Killer in the Family is made into a movie or series,
Yeah.
do you think the theme song should be?
Ooh, the theme song. So just FYI, it's been optioned for a limited series with a South Asian movie star attached,
I
which
knew
is
it.
which is lovely. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, no, I that was really fun. And it happened when it was in manuscript stage. So it was like a Microsoft Word file floating out there in the world, or maybe a PDF. Um, yeah, so one of the comps that people always give me is like Succession for my book. Um, and I actually watched Succession when I was like three-quarters of the way through my book, and I got COVID, and just watched it. And then when I was writing the last quarter, I was listening to the Succession soundtrack, which is fantastic. It was just really, really excellent. So whoever made that, I would love to hire them to do the soundtrack for the movie. They really kind of get the whole kind of power, glamour vibes. Yeah.
oh, and I'm so excited to see it on the screen. Oh, that's such.
Well, it's been optioned, and like that doesn't mean it's going to get made. A lot of my author friends have books that have been optioned, but it's out there, so we can fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Amin Ahmad, thank you so much for joining today. It has
Thank you.
been truly wonderful getting the chance to talk with you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Kelly. Great to be here and great to connect.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.